What if Columbus didn't discover America? Because Africans were already there? Don't scroll. History just dropped something and tried to pick it up quietly. Now let's talk. This question is one history avoids like NEPA avoids steady light. Because once you ask, textbooks start coughing. Teachers start saying, that one is complicated. We're told Columbus discovered America in 1492. But discovered it from who? People were already living there. So let's be honest. What he discovered was directions, not land. Now here's where it gets interesting. Long before Columbus, Africans were already expert sailors. West African civilizations traded across seas, followed ocean currents, and built ships strong enough for long journeys. And guess what? The Atlantic currents move from West Africa straight toward the Americas. No Google Maps, no GPS, just nature saying, go straight. So why isn't this taught? Simple. History loves one hero story, and this one doesn't center in Europe. It suggests Africa wasn't waiting to be found. Africa was already moving, exploring, and connecting. And why does this matter today? Because when people believe their ancestors only arrived late to history, confidence suffers. But when you realize Africa was early, global, and active, something changes inside you. You stop shrinking. You start asking better questions. Now your turn. Do you think Africans reached the Americas before Columbus? Yes or no? Drop your answer in the comments. If this video stretched your brain small, like it, subscribe so history doesn't hide again, and share this with someone who still thinks Columbus was first. History avoided this question, but today we didn't. The Atlantic wasn't a wall, it was a road. Imagine someone telling you the Atlantic Ocean was impossible to cross before Columbus. You'd laugh, right? Well, history wants you to laugh politely. But here's the twist. It wasn't a wall. It was a road. Long before 1492, Africans were already sailing like pros, not hop on a canoe and hope for the best pros. Full-on expert currents reading, star guiding, ocean-conquering pros. Think of them as the ancient GPS of the Atlantic, but cooler and with more style. Now about those West African currents, ever heard of a natural highway? That's exactly what these currents were, flowing straight from West Africa to the Americas. They practically said, step on me. I'll take you there. No accidental travel here, unless you want to end up in Europe by mistake. And this is why, oops, Africans accidentally discovered America is a joke. The Atlantic wasn't a random guess. It was planned, skillful, and precise. Just imagine the look on Columbus's face if he knew people had already sailed these waters centuries before him. Now it's your turn. If you think Africans were the real Atlantic pros, drop a in the comments. If you're shocked and learning something new, hit that like button like the Atlantic currents themselves are pushing you. Subscribe so you don't miss the next story mainstream history tried to hide. And share this with someone who still believes Columbus was the first navigator. Remember, history loves walls, but some walls were really just roads. And today, we're driving on them. Full speed. Let's talk about giant stone heads in Mexico. Yes, huge heads carved out of stone, some over 9 feet tall, weighing several tons. Now, here's the kicker. When historians looked at these heads, their facial features, well, let's just say they were more familiar than they expected. Broad noses, full lips, distinct African traits. Cue the awkward silence in classrooms worldwide. Mainstream history? Oh, they love to stay polite. We'll just call it mysterious and move on. But the truth is staring at us, carved in stone. These heads scream, look closer. Someone doesn't want you to see this. And let's be real. Someone spent years chiseling tons of rock just to make giant heads. This wasn't a casual art project. They clearly had a purpose. The question is, why would African-looking features appear in ancient Mexico, thousands of miles away from Africa? Now, let's make this fun. If you think Africans might have reached the Americas before Columbus, drop a in the comments. If your jaw just hits the floor, hit like it just crushed a few Olmec rocks. Subscribe so we keep digging into the mysteries history didn't want you to see. and share this with someone who still thinks all ancient Americans looked the same. Here's the deal. History avoids comparisons like this because it shakes up everything we think we know. But today, we're not avoiding it. We're staring straight at those massive stone faces, asking, who were they really modeling? And why did history try to hide it? Olmec heads are more than stone. They're a conversation starter, a history breaker, and a giant middle finger to the discovery-only Europe story. If you want, I can also make ultra-realistic 4K image prompts for each major point of this script, with suggested text, just like we did for the previous two. Do you want me to do that next? Let me ask you something. Have you ever heard of a king who said, I'm not interested in the throne anymore. I want to cross the ocean. No scandal, no just vibes and curiosity. Meet Mansa Abubakari II, Emperor of the Mali Empire, one of the richest, most powerful empires on earth. This man had gold, land, respect, and still said, nah, I want answers. According to Arab historians, including records later mentioned by Mansa Musa himself, Abubakari believed the Atlantic Ocean didn't just end. So what did he do? He built hundreds of ships, not one canoe, not two boats. Hundreds? The first expedition went out and didn't return. Most people would say, Omo, let's rest. Not Abubakari. He stepped down as king, handed the empire to his brother, and personally led a second voyage west. And then disappeared from history. Gone. No return. Nobody. No to whom it may concern. So here's the question history avoids. Did he sink? Or did he arrive? Because if a powerful African king crossed the Atlantic before Columbus, that flips the whole discovery story upside down. And that's exactly why this story quietly vanished from textbooks. Too disruptive, too African, too early. Now your turn. Do you think Mansa Abubakari II reached the Americas? Yes or no? Drop your answer in the comments. If this story shocked you, like gold just fell from the sky, subscribe so these lost chapters don't stay lost. And share this with someone who thinks African kings never explored beyond their borders. One king disappeared, but the questions he left behind, they're still sailing. 5 African DNA and cultural traces in the Americas. Let's get a little uncomfortable. Politely. Because this part of history makes textbooks start saying, let's not jump to conclusions. Across parts of the Americas, researchers noticed early genetic patterns and cultural similarities that didn't quite match the official story. Certain DNA markers, physical traits, and cultural practices show up, and history goes, interesting, moving on. Now let's talk about culture. Because culture doesn't lie, it just travels. Shared symbols, familiar drum rhythms, similar spiritual practices, and even crops like okra and yams popping up where they supposedly shouldn't be yet. Coincidence? Maybe. A very busy coincidence that packed luggage and crossed the Atlantic. Then there are traditions that feel oddly familiar. Hairstyles, carving styles, community rituals. Things that make Africans look at ancient American cultures and say, wait, I've seen this before. History quickly responds, relax. It's just parallel development. Ah yes, parallel development. The historical version of nothing to see here. So why do these clues raise uncomfortable questions? Because if African DNA and cultural traces existed in the Americas before Columbus, it means contact happened earlier than we were taught. And that shakes the idea that Africa only arrived in the Americas later and only as victims of slavery. That story's easier. This one is powerful. And power makes people nervous. Now your turn. Have you noticed cultural similarities between Africa and the Americas before? Yes or no? Drop your answer in the comments. If this made your brain itch small, like it. Subscribe so we keep connecting dots, history scattered on purpose. And share this with someone who still thinks culture doesn't travel unless Europe says so. Some clues whisper, some shout, and some make history very uncomfortable. Let me ask you something real quick. How do you draw a place you've never been to? Because according to official history, nobody knew the Americas existed before 1492. Yet somehow, the maps did. Long before Columbus, Ancient African and Islamic scholars were already drawing detailed world maps. Coastlines, landmasses, proportions. Things that shouldn't have been known yet. And then modern historians saw them and said, "Ah, interesting. Let's not make eye contact." Some pre-Columbus maps clearly show land across the Atlantic. Not monsters, not dragons, actual coastlines. And the funny part? These maps weren't made by guesswork. African and Islamic cartographers used astronomy, mathematics, navigation records, and traveler accounts. In short, they weren't doodling, they were calculating. So how did these maps know too much? That's the awkward question. Because if cartographers mapped the Americas before Columbus arrived, it means someone had knowledge. And knowledge usually comes from contact, travel, or reports. History hates when math starts asking questions. Mainstream history's response? Coincidence. Misinterpretation. Probably imaginary. Yes, imaginary maps with accurate coastlines. Sure. Now your turn. Do you think these ancient maps were guesswork or evidence of early contact? Type guess or contact in the comments. If this map just rerouted your brain, like it. Subscribe so we keep unfolding the pages history tried to fold shut. And share this with someone who thinks Google Maps invented geography. Some maps lie, some maps guide, and some maps expose history's secrets. Let's be honest. History doesn't just forget things. History chooses. So if Africans sailed oceans, left cultural traces, showed up on maps, and possibly reached the Americas before Columbus, the real question becomes, why was this buried? Simple answer, power, politics, and who controls the microphone. History is written by winners, and then edited by institutions. When Europe rose to global dominance, it needed a clean origin story. One brave explorer, one discovery, one hero. Roll credits. Multiple civilizations sharing knowledge, Africans showing up early? Nah, that complicates the plot. Now ask yourself, who benefits from the story that Columbus discovered America? Empires, colonial powers, school systems that prefer simple timelines over uncomfortable truths. That story places Europe at the center and everyone else at the edges. Late, silent, and waiting. And once a story becomes tradition, questioning it suddenly feels dangerous. History hates follow-up questions. But imagine rewriting history honestly. Africa wouldn't appear only at the moment of slavery. The Americas wouldn't appear as empty land. Exploration wouldn't belong to one race, one flag, or one year. Rewriting history wouldn't erase Columbus. It would resize him. And that's what scares people. Because when you resize one figure, you have to redraw the whole picture. Now your turn. Do you think history was buried on purpose? Yes or no? Drop it in the comments. If this made you side-eye your textbook, like it. Subscribe so buried stories don't stay buried. And share this with someone who thinks history is always neutral. History isn't just about the past. It's about who gets remembered and who gets erased. So let's bring this home. Because this story isn't just about ships, maps, or stoneheads. It's about you. For a long time, Africa was introduced to the world at the worst possible moment. Slavery. Like history said, don't worry about what came before. Just start here. And when that happens, identity suffers. Confidence shrinks. People start thinking greatness was imported. But imagine knowing your ancestors weren't waiting to be discovered. They were discovering. Sailing oceans, building empires, mapping the world, leaving traces so strong history had to hide them. That knowledge does something dangerous. It builds confidence. And this is why Africans reclaim this story matters. Because when you know your heritage includes exploration, intelligence, and global influence, you stop seeing yourself as a footnote. You start seeing yourself as a chapter. That shift affects how people walk, talk, create, and dream. Now here's the funny part. If history hid this much, what else is missing? What other stories are buried under the polite phrase, not enough evidence? History might be a whole Netflix series, and we've only watched episode 1. So here's your assignment. Do you think more African achievements are still hidden? Yes or no? Drop it in the comments. If this made you sit up straighter, like it. Subscribe so we keep unearthing what was buried. And share this with someone who needs a reminder that their roots are deeper than textbooks admit. History isn't finished. It's just been edited. And today, we pressed edit. Let's end with a question that refuses to behave. If Africans reached America before Columbus, what else have we been told wrong? Because once one untouchable story starts wobbling, others begin sweating. Suddenly you start looking at textbooks like, wait, who exactly approved this version? History loves confidence, even when it's wrong. Think about it. If entire civilizations could sail oceans, leave cultural traces, appear on ancient maps, and then somehow vanish from the official story, that doesn't sound like an accident. That sounds like editing. And once you notice the edits, you can't unsee them. Now, the funny thing is this. History never says, I'm lying. It says, this is all you need to know. So now that this question is in your head, it's going to keep knocking. Every documentary, every classroom lesson, every great discovery story, you'll start hearing silence where answers should be. And that's dangerous, in a good way. Because curiosity is how buried stories come back to life. So let me ask you, did this surprise you? Or confirm what you already suspected? Drop it in the comments. I'm reading them. If this made you rethink even one thing you were taught, hit like. So the algorithm knows history still has unfinished business. Subscribe if you want part 2. Because trust me, this story didn't stop here. And share this before history tries to delete it again. Some questions fade. Some questions change everything. This one, it just unlocked the door.